Hello, it's Yorick, and I've got birds screaming at me from outside my window, and it's starting to annoy me. Um, you can see my face. I'm not quite sure how I feel about it, but it's a necessary evil in order for me to achieve what I want to achieve in today's video. So I want to do two things today. Firstly, I want to thank every single one of you that's hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the page. You've helped me reach my goal of 1,000 subscribers in basically less than 3 months, which is amazing. I'm massively humbled by it, and yeah, I'm hoping that I can continue doing this and I can continue growing as a content creator on YouTube. And secondly, and maybe the most important aspect of this video, is this beautiful VR accessory that I have been sent by Mamut, who are a VR accessory company. They make some of the best quality accessories on the market. And the accessory I'm looking at today is the Mamut Apto3 VR gunstock. Now, a little disclaimer, I was actually sent this gunstock, which was surprising, by Mamut on behalf of Combat Waffle Studios, the guys making the upcoming PvPvE VR raid style shooter, Ghosts of Tabor. So a huge shout out to those guys. Many of you who watch my channel on the regular know that I cover Ghosts of Tabor quite regularly. There'll be a playlist up in the top right hand of your screen. But yeah, any views that I have and any opinions I have on this gunstock are actually my own. They're not fueled by the fact that I was given this. But yeah, huge shout out to them. Thank you so much for sending me this beautiful gunstock. Let's get into it. VR gunstocks are one of those accessories which differ from player to player. Some people consider them to be a pointless gimmick, and others consider them to be an essential part of their arsenal. I sit in the latter camp. I can't play a first-person VR shooter without one. However, no matter what your opinions are on VR gunstocks, the general consensus is that they offer something that is missing from the majority of our lives, which is that sense of stability. For a long time in VR, especially for first-person shooters, having the two independent controllers is all we had. And what you ended up having was freehanding, which I think operator Drewski put it best when you're basically saying that you're trying to aim two pistols and get their iron sights to line up. And although we've developed many different techniques in order to combat this, most VR games have a virtual gunstock, for instance, which basically, when your arms reach a certain angle, it snaps into the center of your screen and acts very much like a conventional first-person shooter. And although that's great, it does come with its own limitations, most notably the sense of sluggishness that comes with them, because they lump on so much gun smoothing that when you pull your gun up, it comes up very slowly and it kind of sways left to right, which although it is kind of more realistic as it gives the gun more weight, the fact is that in games where a lot of the players have the reaction time of a fly in comparison to a human, you're going to lose the majority of gunfights against your opposition, which is what we want to try and avoid as much as possible. So what we developed was several techniques for freehanding, which is where you don't have anything connecting the two and you're not using a virtual stock. So the other main and probably most popular form of freehanding is called cheeking, which is where you have your main hand and you either rest it on your chin, you either rest it on your cheek. In some cases, you need to rest it under your nose, which makes you look like you're sniffing your controller, or you kind of have to rest it on your chest, and then you can use your main hand or your offhand to control the weapon. And this basically, what it does is it makes the headset lose tracking of the controller, which sounds bad at first, but what it basically means is when you rest it here and you've got the controller set, it stays in that position on your character, it doesn't move. But the general issue with this is that when you're playing, you bring your hands up to aim, and a lot of times you'll find that you'll either overshoot or undershoot unless you train it in the shooting ranges. The majority of my competitive onward career has been using freehand like that, but at the beginning of this year of 2022, I decided that I was kind of sick of freehanding, so I moved across to gunstocks. The one I ended up settling on was the BowkVR. This is the signature Marksman. But what I started finding after using this for basically 8 months straight is that I started developing micro fractures in the plastics, which is kind of problematic. You might be able to see them basically along here. You might see the color change. There are little cracks in the holes here. And there's also the reason why this is under duct tape is because there was micro fractures developing in the joint. And what I was finding is when I was playing, the actual back section of the stock started getting loose and moving like so. So I tightened down the screws as much as I could, lumped in a load of Loctite, and then wrapped it up in duct tape so that there's no movement. And although this is very much a band-aid solution to a long-term problem, it worked fine for me, because the general issue is because this is mounted onto literally a stick. The issue with wood is that when you screw into wood, the wood compresses, and then it starts to gain a level of movement, and then you have to screw it down again, and it will compress more and compress more and compress more until the point of where you just strip the wood out. So I ended up getting to a point of where I was like, I need to upgrade. And this leads me on nicely to the Mamut stock, because one of the things about the Mamut stock is that no part of this is 3D printed. It's all either CNC aluminium or mold injected plastics. So the stability and rigidity and just reliability of it, robustness, I guess, is a lot higher. In fact, this is what I probably put as being the top bracket in terms of quality for VR accessories. So the Mamut stock, firstly, it is an absolute piece of art. It's beautifully designed. If you remove the strap from the occasion, it is really beautifully built. It looks amazing, and very minimal branding all over it. There's little accents of branding on certain aspects. Literally every single joint has Mamut on it, but it's not plastered everywhere. And I just found overall that this was the best solution for me, because I was looking at the carbon version of the BowkVR stock, which basically replaces the wooden dowel with carbon tubes, or I was looking at the Pro Tube. But one of the key issues with both of those solutions is that the cups and a lot of the rear parts of the points of contact with the body are 3D printed. I was apprehensive about whether or not it was going to last the time that I needed it to. I don't like to have to replace plastic parts on the regular. So when I came across this, I thought to myself, this is going to last me several years rather than just several months. And that was a real key aspect for me wanting to get the Mamut. And although I was sent this by Mamut and Combat Waffle Studios, I was heavily considering buying this myself. I could get by with the Bowk stock for however long I needed to. I was making modifications and everything to make it more easy to use for me, but when the opportunity arose for me to get one of these, I jumped at it, and it has basically totally replaced my Bowk stock. I just rarely ever use this anymore. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't actually fully anticipating fully moving away from my Bowk stock, because I have used that thing for a long time. I started making modifications to it, and generally speaking, I have been a fervent supporter of the BowkVR accessory line, because firstly, they're very cheap. I mean, this costs around, if you do it yourself, costs around 50 to 60 US dollars or Great British pounds, depending on where you live and what type of printing services you have available to you. But when I first set my hands on this after getting my games of choice calibrated, I was totally just like, yeah, no, I'm not touching my Bowk again. And I was kind of very surprised at that. The reason is because I could set it up how my Bowk stock was set up. I didn't really need to relearn the muscle memory of putting my offhand onto the cups or my main hand, because they basically, I set it up to mimic as much as I could the Bowk stock. So when I get them lined up, you can see that although they're not exactly on point, they are fairly similar. And the whole point was so that I didn't have to relearn my muscle memory. Obviously, you can change the adjustment when it comes to the cheek piece and the butt rests, which is nice, because basically nothing else of this stock, once you set it, is adjustable. That's not necessarily a bad design choice. You can adjust it, you can unscrew the bolts and move them, but the actual internal components inside each of these joints is effectively a toothed washer, which will catch onto some teeth in the actual joints, so that once you tighten it down flush, it just doesn't move. And that's a really good design choice, because having unnecessary movement in your gun stock is something that we all want to avoid, because we want to make sure that our calibration remains the same every single time you use the gun stock. And one of the key things for me, and one of the reasons why I also went for the BowkVR stock initially, was for interchangeability. So you would have noticed pretty much throughout this whole video, I have had 2 different controllers set up, and this is the original touch controller from the Rift S and the original Quest, and this is obviously the Quest 2 controller. And the reason why I've done this is because when I play Onward competitively, I play on my Rift S. I don't play with my Quest linked up, and that's just because there's issues. Like I just don't have a very good link cable, or I don't know. So for me, being able to switch between controllers easily was a very important aspect of the gun stock for me. And it does come with these little hand bits, because obviously I've got these grip controllers which look very much like the Valve knuckle controllers, which means that you can throw your hand about willy-nilly and there's no real concern that you're going to lose the controller, because it's strapped down to your knuckles. And it's a very, very nice setup. These go on, but because I so regularly switch between my 2 controllers, I've left them off, because it's just another thing to take off in order to change them. But yeah, having that as an ability was really nice, because these little grips are actually specifically for the Quest 2, but they fit on the Quest 1 and the Rift S controllers, because they're not really that different. There's some significant differences, mostly in girth and overall shape, but generally speaking, they're fairly similar. So it does work, and these grips are actually rubbered. So let's see if yeah, well, this is the best bit. So basically this type of material, this very supple rubber material, leads all the way down just until the base, where obviously they've made it a solid piece of plastic, so that when you screw in the magnet base, it's not going to fall apart. But just overall, the thing that I really kind of came to appreciate about the Mamut stock was just the fact that it's so well built and it's so well designed that it makes me question why this hasn't been done before. The fact is that most VR accessories are 3D printed. Like, I would probably say close to 80 to 90% of all VR accessories are 3D printed, which is great from one end because it means that people can do it at home, but isn't so great because 3D printed parts, generally speaking, aren't that strong. So having mold injected plastics or actual metal joints makes this just so much more rigid. And Mamut make other things other than just VR gun stocks. They make I think they make like a golf club. They make the grips, because these aren't the standard grips that come with the stock. They are an add-on, and I was very thankful that I got sent these as well. But it just feels so strong, and the reason why my BowkVR stock started dying in the end, or why it started developing fractures, isn't because it's just a badly designed piece of gear, it's just because of user error. And the thing for me is, when I use a gun stock, I take it and I use it like I would use a firearm, so I pull it into my shoulder quite a lot to get a really solid point of contact so that I can control it as well as I can. It just puts unnecessary amounts of stress onto certain aspects of the stock, whether it be this specific joint here or the actual buttstock. And that is why I started developing those fractures, and I started getting them in the cups as well, which is starting to be a bit concerning. So when every single part of the plastic components of my stock started developing cracks and fractures, that's kind of a bit of a motivator. So because this is all solid and the method in which it clamps down basically means that there is no room for movement, makes it the perfect gun stock for me. It might not be the perfect gun stock for you, but for me, this is the ideal solution for the way that I handle my guns in game, or my stock in game. I can't pull back as hard as I necessarily might want to because the controller will come off because it is magnetic. But I can opt to move this joint forwards if I want to. But right now, the way that this is here, it's a lot more comfortable because my wrist is a lot straighter, rather than if I wanted it like that, my wrist would be more bent. And if you're putting a lot of stress into a bent wrist, you're going to cause yourself a lot of issues. So this is just the perfect solution for me, because I can still bring it in quite a lot without it coming off, but also it means that I don't put too much pressure into my shoulder, causing myself injury later on down the line. Now the thing is, and kind of a bit of a pink elephant in the room about the Mamut stock, is that it is very expensive. In comparison to the competition, it is the most expensive gun stock on the market, retailing around 250 Freedom Eagles if you take into consideration the little grip 3s. I think that's what these are called, the little knuckle grips. For the whole stock, knuckle grips, if you're choosing, it'll cost you about 250 quid, which is a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, it's a large sum of money, but this isn't a toy. You know, this isn't the type of equipment that you buy just as a frivolous expense. The thing is this is a tool for someone who is taking VR very, very seriously. It's like all the B-haptic vests or the 360 treadmills you can buy. This is not something that you just buy off the cuff just because it's cheap, like maybe you could say about the BowkVR stock. This is a tool than a toy, you know. I would say very comfortably that I can imagine this is the perfect type of stock for the professional VR competitor. I don't necessarily like to say that I'm a professional VR competitor, although I do play Onward competitively. This to me is the best tool for that, and I feel like I perform better now using this than I did with the Bowk stock. And although this isn't going to make you better at aiming, it's not going to make you better at the game, you still need to put the time in to learn it. The fact is the stability and overall confidence that I have in my ability using this stock is what makes it so worth every single penny that they charge for it. Now, this hasn't really been a review of the Mamut Apto3 gun stock. It's more of an overview of the stock in general and just a bit of a first look and first impressions and my first impressions of the stock. And that's just because I don't feel confident putting an actual review out for this stock until I've put at least 100 hours into it. Because VR gear like this is very subjective. It basically needs to fit to you, and you need to use it in the way you would use a gun stock. And I've already noticed certain aspects, like because of its weight, using it for long periods of time, you know, I'm playing games that can last up to 2-3 hours in Onward at any given time, and I've started noticing that my arm starts to hurt, and it might just be because my body needs to build the muscles in order to use this gun stock more effectively. Because when you get used to basically a stick with a couple of plastic pieces on it, it's a massive jump to go to literally a hunk of metal with lots of magnets and lots of adjustability points. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I hope you're not too mean about how I look. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. I'd greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out massively, and maybe we can achieve the 5,000 subscribers goal by the end of the year, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, that's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.